My dad kicked me out on Christmas Eve to make room for his new wife's kids. He said, "I have a new family now, there's no room for you anymore." So I left. But the next morning, something happened that turned his life upside down. Well, let's go. My name is Marielle and I'm 20 years old. I was driving home for Christmas break from college, and I couldn't wait to see my dad. The radio was playing some cheesy Christmas songs, but I didn't care. I was just excited to be going home. My dad and I had this tradition. Every Christmas Eve we'd sit together in the living room, drink hot chocolate, and look through our old family photo albums. We'd talk about Mom and remember all the good times we had together before she died in that plane crash 2 years ago. It was hard at first, but these Christmas talks helped us both deal with losing her. Dad had taken Mom's death pretty hard. He threw himself into his work and barely talked to anyone for months after the funeral. But slowly he started coming around. He'd call me at college every week, asking how my classes were going and if I needed anything. He seemed lonely, but I figured that was normal. Losing the person you love most in the world has to mess you up pretty bad. I pulled into our driveway around 6 in the evening. The house looked different somehow, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. Maybe Dad had put up new Christmas lights or something. I grabbed my suitcase from the trunk and walked up to the front door, fishing for my keys in my purse. That's when things got weird. I stuck my key in the lock and turned it, but nothing happened. The lock wouldn't budge. I tried again, thinking maybe I was just tired from the drive, but the key definitely wasn't working. I stood there for a minute, confused. Dad had never changed the locks before. I knocked on the door and waited. I could hear footsteps inside, and then the door opened. A woman I'd never seen before stood there looking at me. She was maybe 30, with blonde hair and this stern expression on her face. She was wearing an apron like she'd been cooking something. "What do you need?" she asked, not exactly friendly. I just stared at her for a second. This is my father's house. Marielle. I came home for Christmas vacation." Her whole face changed. The stern look disappeared, and she broke into this big smile, but it felt fake somehow. "Oh my goodness. You're Marielle," she said like she was talking to a little kid. "I'm Tanya, your father's new wife. He went to the store, but he'll be back soon. Come in, come in." New wife. I felt like someone had just punched me in the stomach. Dad got married. When? Why didn't he tell me? I walked into the house in a daze, dragging my suitcase behind me. Everything looked the same but different. There were new pictures on the walls, different curtains, stuff that definitely wasn't ours. "I'll just go up to my room," I said, heading for the stairs. "Oh, honey, you should wait for your father down here in the living room," Tanya said, stepping in front of me. "Your room is... well, it's occupied right now." "Occupied?" "Yes." "By who?" "Just come sit down and wait for your dad. He can explain everything." I didn't know what else to do, so I left my suitcase by the stairs and followed her into the living room. I sat down on our old couch and Tanya sat down right next to me, way too close for comfort. "I know this must be a shock," she said, still with that fake smile. "But your father and we fell in love the moment we met. It was like something out of a movie. We got married 2 weeks ago. It was a small ceremony, just the two of us and my boys. I have 2 sons, Noah and Eli. They're 8 and 10. Such sweet kids. Your father absolutely adores them already." That's when I heard it. Kids screaming and running around upstairs. Loud thumping noises like they were jumping on furniture. "Those are my babies," Tanya said with a laugh. "They're so excited to be living in a real house now. We were in this tiny apartment before, and now they have so much room to play." "Where exactly are they playing?" "Yes." "Oh, your father fixed up your old room for them. He painted it blue and bought them bunk beds and everything. He even got them new toys and video games. He's such a wonderful stepfather already." I couldn't breathe. My room. The room where I grew up. Where I'd done homework and talked on the phone with friends and cried about Mom. Where I kept all my stuff, all my memories, gone. Where am I supposed to sleep? "Yes." "Well, honey, you'll have to talk to your father about that. I'm sure you two can work something out. Just then I heard the front door open and close. Dad walked into the living room carrying grocery bags. When he saw me, he didn't smile. He didn't run over and give me a hug like he always did. He just stood there and nodded. "Hi, Marielle. I see you've met Tanya." "Hi, Dad." I stood up, expecting him to at least give me a hug, but he just set the bags down on the coffee table. "Good, that makes this easier." He sat down in his recliner and looked at me like I was a problem he had to solve. "Marielle, you need to understand something. Things have changed around here. I have a new family now and they live here. There's no room for you anymore." I felt like the floor was falling out from under me. "But Dad, it's Christmas Eve. I came home for the holidays. Where am I supposed to go?" Dad shrugged. "That's your problem to figure out. You're 20 years old, Marielle. You're an adult. Adults figure these things out for themselves. Maybe you could get a hotel room," Tanya suggested helpfully. "Or just go back to your dorm. I'm sure it's still open." I looked at my father, waiting for him to tell me this was all some kind of sick joke. That of course I could stay, that we'd still look at photo albums and talk about Mom like we always did. But he just sat there silent. "Can I at least stay here tonight? Just one night until I figure out where to go?" Tanya jumped in before Dad could answer. "Oh, that would be so inconvenient for us. My parents are coming tomorrow and my brother's family and my aunts and uncles. All the rooms are already spoken for. You'd just be in the way. Your things are already packed," she added cheerfully. "I put everything in boxes upstairs. You can take them with you when you go." I walked upstairs on shaky legs. The hallway looked different too. There were family photos on the walls, but they were all of Tanya and her boys. Not a single picture of me or Mom anywhere. I pushed open the door to what used to be my bedroom and almost started crying right there. The walls were painted bright blue now. My old bed was gone, replaced with wooden bunk beds. There were toy cars scattered all over the floor and superhero posters on the walls. It was like I had never existed in this room at all. 3 cardboard boxes sat in the corner. That was it. 20 years of my life packed into 3 boxes. I picked them up one by one and carried them downstairs. Dad and Tanya were talking quietly in the kitchen, but they stopped when they saw me. "Got everything?" Tanya asked brightly. I looked at my father one more time. "Dad, are you really doing this to me on Christmas Eve?" He wouldn't even look at me. "You'll figure it out, Marielle. You always do." That hurt worse than anything Tanya had said. I carried my boxes out to my car and loaded them in the trunk. The whole time, I kept expecting Dad to come running out to tell me he was sorry, that this was all a mistake. But he never came. I sat in my car for a few minutes trying to think. Where was I supposed to go? It was getting dark, and everything would be closed tomorrow for Christmas. I pulled out my phone and started calling relatives who lived in town. First I tried my Aunt Leona, but it went straight to voicemail. Then Uncle Ray, no answer. My cousin Jessie's phone just rang and rang. Finally my Aunt Clarice picked up. "Marielle, hi honey. What's up?" "Hi, Aunt Clarice. I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm kind of in a bind. Can I stay at your place tonight?" "Oh sweetie, I'm so sorry, but we're not even home. We left this morning to visit Daryl's parents in Florida. We won't be back until after New Year's. Is everything okay?" "Yeah, it's fine. Have a good trip." I hung up and put my head on the steering wheel. Everyone was gone. Everyone had somewhere else to be for Christmas, except me. Then I remembered Grandma Ruth. Dad's mom lived about 2 hours away in the next town over. I hadn't talked to her much lately because Dad always said she was getting old and didn't need to be bothered with our problems. But maybe she could help me. I dialed her number, and she picked up on the second ring. "Marielle, what a wonderful surprise. I was just thinking about you." "Hi, Grandma. Look, I need to ask you something, and it's kind of complicated." "What's wrong, honey? You sound upset." I took a deep breath. "Dad got married 2 weeks ago, and he kicked me out of the house tonight. Said there's no room for me anymore because his new wife and her kids live there now. I don't have anywhere to go." There was silence on the other end for a long moment. That son of mine has lost his damn mind. You get in your car right now and drive here. Do you hear me? Don't you spend one more minute thinking about this. You drive carefully, and I'll have dinner waiting for you. I started crying then. Real tears, not the angry ones I'd been holding back at Dad's house. Thank you, Grandma. I love you, honey. Now get driving. The drive to Grandma's house gave me time to think, but thinking just made me angrier. How could Dad do this to me? How could he remarry without even telling me? And who was this Tanya woman anyway? Where did she come from? By the time I pulled into Grandma's driveway, it was almost 9 o'clock. She must have been watching for me, because she opened the door before I could even knock. "Oh, my sweet girl," she said, pulling me into the biggest hug. "Come inside. You must be starving." Grandma's house always smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. She had a small Christmas tree in the corner with twinkling lights, and the dining table was set for two with her good china. "I made your favorite," she said, leading me to the kitchen. "Pot roast with mashed potatoes. And I've got apple pie in the oven." We sat down to eat, and for the first time all day I felt like I could breathe again. "Now tell me everything," Grandma said. "Start from the beginning." I told her about driving home, about not being able to get in with my key, about Tanya and her kids living in my room. I told her about Dad acting like I was a stranger, like I was just some inconvenience he had to deal with. Grandma listened to everything without saying a word, but I could see her getting madder and madder. "That boy," she finally said, shaking her head. "I raised him better than this. I don't know what's gotten into him. You really didn't know about the wedding?" "Not a word. Your father's been avoiding my calls for months. Every time I tried to talk to him, he said he was too busy with work. I should have known something was up." After dinner, Grandma called her friend Mrs. Waverly, who lived next door to Dad's house. "Ellen, it's Ruth. What do you know about this woman my son married?" "Oh my goodness, you didn't know?" Mrs. Waverly said. "He's been dating her for about 3 months. She moved in with those 2 boys maybe 6 weeks ago. They had a little wedding ceremony 2 weeks ago, but it was just immediate family. I was surprised you weren't there." 3 months. Grandma looked at me. "He's known this woman for 3 months, and he married her? The boys are sweet enough," Mrs. Waverly continued, "but they're loud, always running around the yard making noise. And that woman, she drives this big SUV that she parks right in front of everyone's driveway. Very inconsiderate, if you ask me." We talked to Mrs. Waverly for a few more minutes, but she didn't know much else. After Grandma hung up, she immediately dialed Dad's number. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Mom, this isn't really a good time. Michael Dean, you listen to me right now. What in the hell do you think you're doing? Mom, please. I can't talk about this now." "Oh, you'll talk about it. You kicked your own daughter out of the house for some woman you barely know. Have you completely lost your mind?" "It's complicated, Mom. You don't understand the situation." "Then explain it to me. And while you're at it, explain why I had to hear about your wedding from the neighbors instead of from you." "I didn't want to bother you, Mom," Dad said on the phone. "I was going to tell you about Tanya later, when things settled down." "Bother me? When you needed money for your business last year, you called me at midnight. But getting married isn't worth bothering me about." I could hear the tension in Dad's voice, even through the phone. "Look, I was afraid you wouldn't like Tanya. She's younger than me, and I thought you'd judge her. So instead, you just cut your own daughter out of your life for a woman you've known for 3 months. Tanya thinks Marielle resents her. She says Marielle would just cause problems between us." Grandma's face was getting red. "Tanya thinks. Who the hell is Tanya to think anything about my granddaughter? Marielle doesn't even know this woman." But Dad had already hung up. Grandma slammed the phone down on the table. "That boy is going to regret this. Mark my words." We spent Christmas Eve talking about everything except Dad and Tanya. Grandma showed me old photo albums I hadn't seen in years. Pictures of Dad when he was little, pictures of her and Grandpa before he died. She made hot chocolate and we watched old Christmas movies until late. But I could tell she was still furious. She kept muttering under her breath about ungrateful sons and gold-digging women. Christmas morning we opened presents and had a nice breakfast. Grandma had somehow managed to get me a few small gifts, even though she didn't know I was coming. She said she always kept extra presents around just in case. Around noon she called Dad again. "Michael, I've been thinking about your behavior all night, and I've made a decision. You want to choose some stranger over your own family. Fine. But don't expect me to leave you anything in my will. I'm taking you out completely." She hung up and turned to me. "Don't worry, honey. Everything I have will go to you now. That house, my savings, everything." He made his choice. I felt bad about that, but I was also touched that Grandma was willing to cut off her own son to support me. A few hours later we heard a car pull up outside. Grandma looked out the window and sighed. "Speak of the devil. Your father's here." Dad came storming up to the front door and started banging on it. "Mom, open up. I need to talk to you." Grandma opened the door but didn't invite him in. "What do you want, Michael?" Dad pushed past Grandma and pointed at me. "You called my mother and filled her head with lies. You're trying to turn my family against me." I told her the truth. "You kicked me out of the house on Christmas Eve. You're just mad that I'm happy again. You can't stand that I found someone after your mother died. You want me to be miserable forever." It hurt. Really hurt. "Dad, I want you to be happy, but you didn't even tell me you were dating someone, let alone that you were getting married. Because I knew you'd react like this. Tanya was right about you. She said you'd be jealous and try to break us up. You came here to manipulate my mother into taking your side." Grandma stepped between us. "That's enough. Don't you dare call your daughter names in my house. She's not a little girl anymore, Mom. She's 20 years old and she needs to grow up. Tanya and I agree that Marielle needs to learn to take care of herself." "Tanya and you agree?" Grandma looked disgusted. "You've known this woman for 3 months, and you're taking her advice about your own daughter?" "Tanya understands me," Dad said defensively. "She makes me happy in ways I haven't been happy since Laura died." "And what about Marielle's happiness? What about your responsibilities as a father?" Dad looked at me with cold eyes. "My responsibility is to my new family now. Tanya's boys need a father figure, and I'm going to be there for them. Marielle's had 20 years of my attention. It's time for me to focus on my stepsons." "So, you're replacing me with them?" I asked quietly. "I'm not replacing anyone," he said. "I'm just making new priorities. And speaking of priorities," he continued, his voice getting colder, "I'm not paying for your college anymore either. Tanya thinks I should spend my money on Noah and Eli instead. They're going to need sports equipment and summer camps and all sorts of things. You can figure out how to pay for your own education." My heart dropped. Dad had promised to pay for all 4 years of college. I only had 2 years left, but they were the expensive ones, with all my major classes. "Don't worry about that," Grandma said quickly. "I'll pay for Marielle's college, every penny." Dad's face turned red. "This is exactly what I was talking about. You're turning my own mother against me." "Nobody turned me against you, Michael," Grandma said. "You did that all by yourself when you chose some woman over your own flesh and blood." Dad looked back and forth between us. "You'll both regret this. Tanya was right when she said I should cut ties with people who don't support my marriage." "Then go," Grandma said quietly. "Go back to your wife and her children. But don't come back here expecting forgiveness." Dad stormed out and slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. I started crying then. Really crying like I hadn't since Mom died. "Oh, honey," Grandma said, putting her arms around me. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry he's acting like this. I don't understand what happened to him. He wasn't like this before. Some men lose their minds when they meet the wrong woman," Grandma muttered. "Your grandfather always said that a bad woman can turn a good man into a stranger." The next day, Grandma spent hours on the phone. She called every relative we had, telling them exactly what Dad had done. She called his brother, his sister, his cousins, everyone. By the time she was done, half the family was refusing to speak to Dad. His business partner's wife called to say they were canceling their New Year's party invitation. His brother Tom said he wouldn't be investing in Dad's company expansion like they'd planned. "Let's see how he likes being cut off from his family," Grandma said grimly. I stayed with Grandma through New Year's and then went back to college, but every week she'd call with updates about Dad's situation. "Your Uncle Tom refused to give your father that loan," she reported. "And your Aunt Patricia won't hire Tanya at her office. Nobody in the family wants anything to do with either of them." 2 weeks later she called again. "Mrs. Waverly says there's yelling coming from your father's house all the time now. Tanya screaming at the boys, your father screaming at Tanya. The neighbors are starting to complain." I felt a little bad about that, but mostly I was just hurt and angry. Dad had made his choice. Now he had to live with it. 2 months later, Dad showed up at my college. I was walking out of my psychology class when I saw him standing by the student center, looking uncomfortable in his business suit. "Marielle, we need to talk." I didn't want to talk to him, but I was curious about what he wanted. We went to a little cafe off campus and sat across from each other at a small table. "This is all your fault," he said right away. "Because of you, none of my relatives will talk to me anymore. Uncle Tom won't invest in my business expansion. Aunt Patricia won't hire Tanya. Everyone treats me like I'm some kind of monster." I stirred my coffee and looked at him. He looked older somehow, more tired. "You made your choice, Dad. You chose Tanya and her kids over me. These are just the consequences. My business is struggling because of you. Tanya and I are fighting all the time because we don't have enough money. She keeps threatening to leave me. That's not my problem anymore. Remember, you said I needed to grow up and solve my own problems." Dad's face got red. "You have to fix this, Marielle. Call your grandmother. Tell the family you lied about what happened. Tell them I didn't really kick you out." I got up and left him sitting there alone at the table. 2 years passed. Grandma paid for my college like she promised, and I spent every vacation at her house. I didn't see Dad or talk to him at all during that time, but Grandma kept me updated on his life. "Your father's business is falling apart," she told me during my junior year. "Mrs. Waverly says he's been asking all his friends to hire Tanya, but nobody wants to. She's been staying home with those boys, saying her husband should support his family." "How are things with them?" "Yes. Not good. Mrs. Waverly hears shouting from that house almost every night. The boys are running wild, getting in trouble at school. Tanya yells at them constantly." During my senior year, Grandma called with bigger news. "Your father had to sell the house, Marielle. His business completely collapsed. He bought a small apartment across town. And Tanya left him, took the boys and moved back in with her parents. Apparently, she said she didn't sign up to be poor. She left him. Mrs. Waverly says Tanya told the neighbors that your father had promised her a life of luxury. When the money ran out, so did she." Graduation day came in May. Grandma was there in the front row, crying with pride. Uncle Tom came with his family, and Aunt Patricia brought flowers. Half the family showed up to celebrate with me. Dad was there too, but he sat in the very back row by himself. He looked much older now, thinner, wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit right. After the ceremony, he walked over to where I was standing with my family. "Marielle, can I talk to you for a minute?" Dad and I walked away from the crowd. "Congratulations," he said quietly. "Your mother would have been proud. I want to make things right between us. I know I made mistakes. I divorced Tanya. I realized you were right about her." I looked at him carefully. "What do you want, Dad?" "I want my daughter back. I want to be your father again. I got a job working for my friend Steve's construction company. It's not much, but it's honest work. I want us to be a family again. You chose to stop being my father. You can't just decide to start again when your other choice didn't work out. I know I hurt you, but people make mistakes, Marielle. Can't you forgive me?" I thought about it for a long minute. I'm not ready for that, Dad. Maybe someday, but not now. He looked disappointed but nodded. I understand. A few months after graduation, I found a good job at a marketing firm in the city. I rented my own apartment and started my adult life. Grandma was so proud of me, and I made sure to visit her often and bring her little gifts to thank her for everything she'd done. One day, Grandma called with more news about Dad. Your father found some new investors for a business venture. He thinks he can rebuild what he lost. And he's dating someone new too. Her name is Carolyn. She's about his age, works as a nurse. Seems like a decent woman from what Mrs. Waverly says. 6 months later, Grandma invited both me and Dad to dinner at her house. I almost said no, but she asked me as a special favor. Dad looked better when I saw him. He'd gained some weight back and seemed less stressed. We sat around Grandma's dining table, and mostly I just listened while he talked. The new business is going well, he said. We're building custom kitchen cabinets. It's smaller than what I had before, but it's profitable. And Carolyn is wonderful. She's nothing like Tanya. She's kind and honest and doesn't care about money or fancy things. I'd like you to meet her sometime. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I'm also seeing a therapist, Dad continued. Trying to understand why I made such bad decisions. Why I chose a woman I barely knew over my own daughter. That surprised me. Dad had never been the type to admit he needed help. The therapist says I was so desperate not to be alone after your mother died that I ignored all the red flags about Tanya. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I hope maybe someday we can have some kind of relationship again. I looked at this man who used to be my hero, who had broken my heart completely, who was now trying to put his life back together. Maybe, I said softly. Someday. But it's going to take time. Dad nodded. I understand. I'll wait as long as it takes. Now I'm doing well in my career. I have my own apartment, good friends, and a life I'm proud of. I visit Grandma every few weeks and always bring her something special to show my gratitude for saving me when I had nowhere else to go. Dad and I exchange emails sometimes, and we see each other at family gatherings at Grandma's house. We're polite to each other, but we're not close like we used to be. Maybe we never will be again, but I'm okay with that. I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most can hurt you the worst. And I learned that real family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who stand by you when everything falls apart.